In week 13 of 2026, I mean, Manchester United held the soccer ball for almost an entire match, and they still lost.
Right, which is just wild.
And then, a brand new expansion team just walked onto the pitch and totally humiliated the reigning champions. And at the exact same time, the International Olympic Committee essentially rewrote the biological definition of who was allowed to compete globally.
Yeah, it was honestly a week that completely shattered that whole illusion that sports are just this like linear progression of highlights and box score.
Definitely.
We're basically watching the foundational architecture of these games being stress tested all at once.
Well, welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are looking at a massive stack of sources covering this past week in global women's sports. So we've got match reports, policy announcements, viewership data, all from week 13.
So a lot to get through.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And the mission for you listening today is to get underneath those headlines. We're going to skip all the confusing sports jargon, and we're just going to extract the actual mechanisms driving these stories.
Because honestly, when you lay all these sources out on a table, there's this very clear defining theme that emerges.
Which is?
Well, we are witnessing this massive collision between like structural disruption and unshakable dominance. You've got entirely new rule books and upstart teams just crashing headfirst into legacy dynasties.
It's fascinating. But, before we can even look at who scored what on the field, we really have to look at the boardroom.
Yeah, the rule changes.
Exactly. We have to look at the shifting rules of engagement because that is where the most profound disruption actually occurred this week. The International Olympic Committee announced a major policy shift.
Yeah, it's a huge one.
Massive. They're restricting participation in women's Olympic events to biological females, and this includes the reintroduction of sex testing.
Right. And I mean, the magnitude of this really cannot be overstated. From a purely administrative standpoint, it has sparked a massive global debate. It's deeply dividing athletes and federations right now. The core tension of the debate, at least as outlined in our sources, it basically pits the concept of competitive fairness against the concept of universal inclusion.
And I actually want to pause right here and be incredibly explicit with you listening. Our goal today is not to weigh in on the ethics of this debate or to take a side at all.
Right, absolutely not.
We are simply here to impartially report the facts of the policy exactly as they exist in the source material and to try to understand how this mechanically reshapes the sports landscape.
And that mechanical reshaping, it's going to be a monumental task. I mean, this is no longer a philosophical discussion,
It's actual policy now.
Exactly. It's a concrete policy that fundamentally alters the qualification pipelines worldwide as we head toward the Los Angeles 2028 Olympics.
Which is coming up fast.
So fast. Just think about the logistical burden this places on a national federation. They now have to implement testing protocols, navigate all the legal and privacy frameworks of their respective countries, and basically completely recalibrate their rosters.
It honestly feels like redrawing the map of the sporting world right before a massive global expedition.
That's a good way to put it.
You have teams packing their bags for Los Angeles, and suddenly the actual borders of who can even get on the plane have just moved.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Federations are essentially flying the plane while rebuilding the engine. And the crazy thing is, this administrative upheaval is taking place at the exact same moment that the business of women's sports is experiencing an unprecedented financial boom.
Which brings up a really fascinating contradiction, right? Because you would think massive regulatory uncertainty would, I don't know, scare off investors.
You'd assume so, yeah.
But the commercial growth is just going supernova. I mean, our sources show NCAA Women's March Madness breaking audience records in just its early rounds.
Unbelievable numbers there.
Yeah. And the National Women's Soccer League, the NWSL, they just kicked off their 14th season with record-breaking attendance. And it's not just the U.S., it's a global phenomenon.
Right, look at the Philippines.
Exactly. Look at the 2026 Women in Sports Awards in the Philippines, which specifically honored their national women's football team. The global storytelling is just rising everywhere.
Yeah, the detail about the NWSL entering its 14th season is kind of the linchpin here.
How so?
Well, 14 years means you have achieved generational stability. Think about it. The 18-year-old rookies who are being drafted into the NWSL today, they were 4 years old when the league started.
Oh, wow, yeah. I didn't think about that.
Right. They grew up watching it. They aren't pioneers hoping the league survives. They're the first generation of true league natives who have literally been in professionalized development pipelines their entire lives.
Okay, but let me push back on that a bit. If a league is that established, shouldn't the legacy teams be virtually unbeatable by now?
You'd think that, but no.
Because the upsets we saw this week were staggering. I mean, the Denver Summit, which is a brand new expansion franchise, just pulled off a 2-0 shutout against the reigning league champions, NJNY Gotham FC.
Yeah, an incredible match.
An expansion team beating the defending champs in week 1. I always assumed expansion teams were just kind of cobbled together from players other teams didn't want.
Well, historically that was true. In the early days of almost any sports league, expansion teams were usually terrible for their first 5 years.
Right, because they have no chemistry.
Exactly, no chemistry, and they lacked top-tier talent. But because of that deep 14-year development pipeline we just talked about, the baseline level of talent in women's soccer is incredibly high right now.
So there's just more good players to go around.
Tons of them. A startup franchise like Denver can now enter the league and immediately draft or sign elite world-class players who simply couldn't find starting minutes on other crowded rosters.
So the sheer volume of talent essentially neutralizes the advantage of being a legacy team.
Exactly.
It's kind of like a tech startup entering the market today, you know. They don't have to invent their own servers or software from scratch. The infrastructure is already there, allowing them to compete with legacy corporations on day one.
Precisely. The gap between a champion and a newcomer is smaller than it's ever been. And we actually saw a different kind of disruption happen in Europe, specifically in the UEFA Women's Champions League.
Oh, the Bayern Munich match.
Yeah, FC Bayern Munich women defeated Manchester United women 3-2 in the quarterfinal first leg. Now, you mentioned at the top of the show that Manchester United held the ball for almost the entire match. They completely dominated possession.
Which is what completely baffles me. I mean, if United had the ball all game, aren't they technically controlling the match?
Not necessarily.
Why do teams spend millions of dollars acquiring star midfielders whose only job is to hold the ball if possession doesn't actually guarantee a win?
Well, it really comes down to the difference between active possession and passive possession. Having the ball is generally considered safe, right? If you have the ball, the other team can't score.
Right, makes sense.
But what Bayern Munich executed was a tactical masterclass in ruthless efficiency. They employed what is known as a low block.
Okay, break that down for us. What is a low block in practice?
So a low block means Bayern intentionally retreated into their own half of the field. They essentially invited Manchester United to have the ball, but only in non-threatening areas really far away from the goal.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, Bayern packed their defenders tightly together, just closing off all the passing lanes.
So they were basically using a rope-a-dope strategy.
Exactly.
Just letting the opponent punch themselves out, swing wildly, and overextend their defense while Bayern just covered up and waited for the perfect moment to counterattack.
That is the exact mechanism. When a team like United has the ball for that long without scoring, they get super frustrated.
Which is human nature.
Right, so they start pushing their own defenders further up the field to try and break through the wall. And the moment they make a mistake and turn the ball over, boom, Bayern strikes into that massive empty space they left behind.
Wow.
Pernille Harder scored twice for Bayern, and Momoko Tanikawa sealed the win late. And Harder is a player who only needs a fraction of an inch of space. She is surgically precise.
So looking at that Bayern Munich versus Manchester United match, does dominating possession even matter anymore if you lack that ruthless surgical efficiency?
I argue it doesn't.
Because that has to be a brutal psychological blow for Manchester United. You walk off the pitch feeling like you dictated the pace, you passed beautifully, but you still lost the game because you lacked a lethal finishing touch.
Yeah, it proves that in modern soccer, you don't need the ball for 90 minutes to win. You just need to be flawless in the 3 or 4 transitional moments when you actually do have it.
And we are seeing this trend of new teams disrespecting the established hierarchy in other sports too. Like, our sources highlight the Professional Women's Hockey League, the PWHL.
Right, the Seattle Torrent game.
Yeah, the Seattle Torrent secured a landmark victory over the New York Sirens, which is a massive milestone for a growing league. But again, it's a newer franchise stepping onto the ice and treating an established team as a target rather than acting with reverence.
These team sports are just highly volatile right now because tactics are evolving so quickly. And like we said, the influx of commercial investment allows new franchises to acquire top talent immediately. The parity is at an all-time high.
Which makes the second half of our sources so utterly fascinating.
A total contrast.
Right, because while the team sports like soccer and hockey saw chaotic upsets and underdog victories, the individual sports and the established collegiate powerhouses told the exact opposite story.
Ironclad, suffocating consistency.
Exactly. Let's look at the athletes who simply refuse to lose. Let's start with gymnastics.
Okay.
The UCLA Bruins women's gymnastics team just won the 2026 Big Ten Championship. And what is so remarkable about this achievement is that it's a back-to-back title for them, but they just switched conferences.
That's incredible.
They moved from the Pac-12 into the Big Ten and just kept winning. Now, I always assumed a backflip is a backflip, regardless of what conference you are competing in. Shouldn't their scores translate perfectly?
Yeah, so that is a very common misconception about judge sports. Gymnastics is not a race against a stopwatch. It relies heavily on subjective judging panels.
Right. Humans are scoring it.
Exactly. And historically, different collegiate conferences have had slightly different scoring tendencies and regional biases.
Oh, that is interesting. How drastically can those tendencies actually differ?
Significantly enough to cost a team a championship, to be honest. For instance, judges in one conference might heavily reward artistry, dance elements, and massive amplitude on tumbling passes.
Okay.
But then judges in another conference might be notoriously strict about microscopic technical deductions, like the exact angle of a split leap or a tiny slide of the foot on a landing.
So when UCLA moved to the Big Ten, they weren't just changing the logo on their leotards or dealing with brutal cross-country travel schedules.
No, not at all. They had to adapt their choreography, their skill selection, and their pacing to thrive in a totally unfamiliar environment.
They had to re-engineer the actual construction of their routines to satisfy an entirely new ecosystem of judges.
Exactly. And to win a championship immediately after a conference move like that, it proves that UCLA's dominance is not circumstantial. They don't rely on friendly regional judging.
Their foundational technique is just so airtight.
Right, they can impose their standard on any environment.
So it's like moving to a brand new city and instantly being elected mayor. They just force the environment to adapt to them.
That's a great analogy.
And we saw that exact same imposition of will in professional tennis this week, too. Coco Gauff hit a massive milestone, reaching her first career Miami Open semifinal by taking down Belinda Bencic.
A huge win for her.
Yeah, the sources signal this as proof that she is transitioning from a rising star to a foundational pillar of the tour in 2026. She is a dominant force right now.
She's really demonstrating the kind of week-in, week-out consistency that separates top 10 players from true legends.
And she definitely has company at the top. Elena Rybakina, who won the Australian Open earlier this year, has officially climbed to world number 2.
Her form is incredible.
She is maintaining this elite form heading into the spring tournaments, which actually makes me wonder about the mental toll of that. Winning a grueling 2-week Grand Slam like the Australian Open seems utterly exhausting. Shouldn't she be suffering a dip in form right now?
You'd think so. What you're describing is actually known on tour as the championship hangover.
Oh, really?
Yeah. After an athlete achieves a massive career-defining goal, there is often an involuntary drop in adrenaline and focus. The body is fatigued, and the mind feels like it has nothing left to prove in the short term.
So the fact that Rybakina did not experience this dip
Is a testament to incredible psychological endurance.
she just recalibrated her baseline.
Exactly. She reset her internal expectations. For athletes at her level, winning a major tournament isn't the finish line. It is simply the standard operating procedure.
Wow.
They process the victory, they bank the ranking points, and they immediately look at the film to see what they can improve for the next match.
Well, we want to talk about standard operating procedures and expecting to win. We have to talk about speed skating.
Oh, absolutely.
The World Sprint Speed Skating Championships took place, and Femke Koch won gold. But it wasn't just a single victory. She led an absolute Dutch podium sweep.
Unbelievable dominance.
Right. First, second, and third place all went to the Netherlands.
It reinforces what is arguably the most dominant national monopoly in any sport right now. The Dutch and speed skating are completely intertwined.
I mean, I understand that they have the infrastructure, the specialized academies, and the coaching, but when we look at Rybakina in tennis, or the absolute lock the Dutch have on speed skating, is there a psychological advantage when an athlete or a nation just expects to win?
Oh, 100%.
How does an opponent even begin to crack that aura of invincibility?
Well, the aura of invincibility is a very real, tangible weapon. If you are lining up against a Dutch speed skater, you are not just racing the athlete next to you, you are racing their institutional memory of winning.
That sounds intimidating.
It is. A Dutch skater doesn't panic if they slip slightly on a turn because their entire cultural infrastructure has taught them that they are meant to win. They literally expect the universe to course correct in their favor.
So the opponent starts feeling the pressure to be absolutely perfect just to stay in the race.
Yes. And the moment an opponent feels the need to be perfect, they start overthinking. Overthinking leads to tense muscles, which ruins the fluidity required for speed skating.
So how do you beat them?
To crack that aura, you have to do what the Denver Summit did in soccer, or what Bayern Munich did with their low block. You have to disrupt the rhythm early. You have to force the dominant athlete into an uncomfortable, unfamiliar scenario,
But doing that against a machine like the Dutch speed skating team.
whose foundational technique is virtually flawless. It's nearly impossible.
So we are essentially watching real-time case studies in strategy, resilience, and problem solving. It is fascinating to see how a concept like ruthless efficiency translates from a team strategy in European soccer to the individual psychological warfare of professional tennis.
The sports are different, but the human adaptations required to succeed are remarkably similar.
Totally.
Whether it is an Olympic federation scrambling to adapt to a massive biological policy shift, or a gymnastics team reverse engineering their routines for new judges, it is all an exercise in navigating rapid change.
And we hope that by cutting through the noise today, you listening have a clearer picture of how these structural changes are playing out across the globe. We covered the achievements, the upsets, and the news across soccer, hockey, gymnastics, tennis, and speed skating.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. But before we wrap up this deep dive, there's one final provocative thread from our sources that we need to pull on.
The piece of the puzzle that hasn't quite hit the main stage yet.
Exactly that. Tucked away in the data for this week, completely overshadowed by the massive television ratings of March Madness and the intense global debate surrounding the IOC policy, is the grassroots pipeline.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Right. Specifically, the data highlights college tennis. Our sources note that right now there are multiple NCAA athletes earning weekly honors and maintaining massive, unbroken, undefeated streaks. The depth in these collegiate development pipelines is deeper than it has ever been.
It is a pressure cooker of highly trained, hyper-specialized talent just waiting to break through to the professional ranks.
So here's the question for you to ponder as you go about your week. We know that commercial growth is exploding, bringing unprecedented money and resources to professional leagues.
Right.
And we know that the fundamental policies of Olympic qualification are being completely rewritten. So when this bubbling, undefeated grassroots talent pool finally arrives on the main stage, how will they rewrite the landscape?
It's the million-dollar question.
They're stepping into a sports world that is wealthier, yet more volatile than ever before. What kind of dynasties will they build?
They are inheriting a map that is currently being redrawn. They won't just be playing the games, they will be defining the new era.
It is going to be a fascinating journey to watch unfold over the next decade. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your eyes on the boardrooms, watch how the tactics evolve on the pitch, and we will catch you next time.